Welcome to Shift, a college admissions ACT, SAT, and CLT podcast for a changing world. I'm Tyler, the founder of Achievable, and we have affordable ACT and CLT courses that include everything you need to ace the exam. A full textbook, tons of review questions backed by our memory-enhancing algorithm, videos on key topics, a built-in study planner, and full-length practice exams. You can get a free trial at achievable.me, and if you like it, use the code podcast to get 10% off. Now, let's get started. Today we've got Tom Ehlers from Method Learning with us today. And Tom, I'd love if you could introduce yourself and your company.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Yeah, hi all. My name is Tom Ehlers. I'm the founder of Method Learning. We provide SAT, ACT, and all aspects of college counseling, helping families with coming up with an appropriate list of schools to apply to, helping with the resume, the essays, the application, and making sure families don't overpay for college. We also have our platform, our SAT, ACT platform that schools provide to all students in their community. And we have about 1,000 schools around the country in all 50 states who provide that platform to students. So, yeah, great to be here, Tyler.
Yeah, fantastic. One, that makes you a great person for today's topic, right? Which is talking about, 11th grade. We did an episode, which I'll publish that before we do this one, on 10th grade. And, 11th grade is where we really start to get into the real deal when it comes to kind of gearing up for either the ACT or SAT or gearing up for college admissions process broadly. So I think, to start this off, what are the big things that, I think everyone should have on their list when they're looking at 11th grade, like kind of looking forward into what they need to be doing and have their student or child, however you want to put it, doing? And then after that, kind of like, what are the things that they should be doing, but people typically miss?
Yeah, so it's a great question and kind of have a bunch of thoughts to share, and we'll do so as succinctly as possible. I mean, first of all, so the standard timeline for junior year is PSAT in the fall, ACT, SAT in maybe the winter, spring of junior year. And so many families, they want, they kind of um, express themselves to you or I and all of us in the test prep industry like, oh, we just want to get this over with as soon as possible.
Mm,
Get the SAT and ACT over with as soon as possible and move on. And of course, I can appreciate that. We all get that. But I do like to remind people that for many students, they're going to get their best scores in either spring of junior year or even fall of senior year. They just have so much more time in school under their belts. They're more mature. Obviously, it's more time to improve your vocabulary and improve your reading comprehension skills. Now, listen, having said that, of course, there are tons of students who can score really, really well in the fall of their junior year, or maybe even before that.
mm,
But I kind of say to people like, really, what's the point? Yeah, you could take it earlier and earlier and earlier, but you're probably going to score even higher, in 11th grade. So I guess what I'm saying, Tyler, is of course there's a large range.
mm,
For sure there are students where it is appropriate for them to, and I do recommend that students start to prepare for the SAT and ACT in the summer before junior year. So if a student is a high achiever, highly motivated, they're going to be very busy in 11th grade, which many high achieving students are, then of course it makes sense to prepare summer before junior year and maybe even take the SAT in August, either at the start of your junior year or just before school starts. Maybe you take the September ACT in your junior year or the October SAT. We've all had plenty of students who have done one of those exams and scored very well. And of course, there's also the argument that, hey, my son or daughter has already taken all the math that's going to be on the test. So in that respect, maybe it's even better to take it earlier when all of that math is fresh in their heads, because by 11th grade, they've moved on to, pre-calculus or
right.
AP calc, right?
I mean, I remember when I
Which
was that age, like getting into pre-calc and stuff, it was like, going from like, pardon the analogy, friends of mine who speak these languages, but like I went, going from Spanish to Italian. Like it's similar, but it's not exactly the same. And you kind of start to lose the previous thing that you learned because you got to learn all these new rules.
Yeah, I think there's something for sure. There's something to that. So again, like yes, there is a large range, um, but again, the standard plan and the plan that's probably best for most students is PSAT in the fall, ACT, SAT winter, spring. And one thing I just have to remind, I'm sure you've discussed this on other episodes, is the ACT offers that TIR service. It stands for Test Information Release. It's only offered right now December, February, and September. And it's an incredibly valuable tool. When you register
Mhm.
for the ACT, you check the box, you pay the extra $20, you see all the questions you got wrong, so you can actually learn from your mistakes. And
Right.
it's tragic to me. In 26 years of doing this, 95% of the families I talk to, they're just not clear on what it is. They don't check the box, right? And then I'd say, like, imagine taking a 3 hour exam, getting a score you're not completely satisfied with. No one tells you what you did wrong. And then somebody says, go take that exam again. Well, that's absurd, right? So that to me has to be part of this conversation about 11th grade. My son and my daughter are going to take the ACT in December of their junior year. And I'm going to say to them, you're not taking it in December because it's ultimately going to be your best score. You're taking it in December so we can see what you're doing wrong. You can learn from your mistakes, use that as a springboard to a higher score. Now, they
Right.
don't offer that service on the SAT anymore. And that's why you take advantage of the College Board Blue Book app, the 6 practice exams. So again, going back to this topic of 11th grade, taking one of those 6 practice exams, let's say every other week or every third week over a course of time in 11th grade, that's a very intelligent way not only to be very well prepared, but also to little by little lower your anxiety because each time you take a practice exam, you become a little less anxious. You start to realize a little bit more that it's the same types of questions, the same patterns, the questions in a similar way, right? So, um, yeah, I know that was a little long winded, Tyler. I hope that's helpful as far as 11th grade goes.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I think in general, there's just, it is kind of pedal to the metal time. I think it's time, on the academic and, test prep side to really kind of, it's going to become a part of your life now. I'm curious, when you're talking to families about so the other holistic parts of the application, like let's say, extracurriculars, sports, etc. Is junior year where you really start to push them to like become like the treasurer of the club that you're in as opposed to just being a member or other things like that? Like, is this the time to kind of get moving on these things or is that even earlier than that?
Yeah, I mean, ideally it would be earlier. It's the common wisdom. I shouldn't say common wisdom. It's just of course colleges want leaders. Colleges want people who are taking a larger role, taking initiative.
Hmm.
Um, and you can't be the vice president of 6 different clubs,
Hmm.
right? So I mean that's just kind of silly. I mean because then that right the whole point is you're making a commitment to that extracurricular activity. So the things that you're most engaged, most passionate about, take a leadership role as early as possible. And you know we it's this whole like I don't like to get into the whole insane, where everyone's trying to start a club in 7th grade.
Right.
That's not necessary. I mean, look, most high schools they have all of the clubs that are popular. You're not necessarily going to be starting a new club, but there are always things you can do to enhance or take that club to the next level. Of course, you can just organize a project, right? So, um, yeah, so I think it's just keeping it almost like keeping a common sense mentality of, think if you were running a college or university,
Hmm.
and with the types of students you would want leaders, you would want people who are going to contribute to your community. So you want to demonstrate that that's what you're doing. I mean, just to make it personal, I think in a good way, like sometimes I joke about, our son, like he's a good kid. He's a good boy. but he's doing kind of the same things that every other, 15-year-old boy is doing. So in some ways, maybe it's going to be hard for him to stand out in like five different ways when he goes to apply to colleges. And like, like any parent, my wife and I, we went to selected schools, and we would like our kids to go to, the best schools possible. But
Mhm.
it's kind of hard to it's kind of hard to distinguish yourself in seven different ways. I mean, most
Yeah.
kids are, doing the same thing. So I think you ask an important question. I hope people, understand that it's kind of a nuanced, try to give like a thoughtful answer.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, at the end of the day, I would even take what you said a step further, right? Which, I wouldn't say I'm a particularly good salesperson, but I think one of the things I do well is I try to see from the other side's point of view. And if you're a college, who do you want? You want Bill Gates or whatever, right? If Bill Gates is no longer, if he's no longer someone we look up to, then whoever it is, right? Steve Jobs. Like it's there are, outsized returns on your brand as a college if you manage to pick one of those people. And, it's a little bit of just kind of guessing, right? But at the end of the day, um, that's where the people that are really, really passionate about one thing kind of look better to a college than people that are, pretty clearly playing the game and are president of seven clubs that are not even really that related. And also,
Yeah.
how much can you really be doing for those clubs if you're in seven of them or president of seven of them? So I think, yeah, I agree with all that. I think it's important to kind of think about, who the person reading the resume on the other side. What are they going to want to see? Um, I also wanted to like shift gears a little bit here. When we were talking kind of in the prep before this call, you mentioned, basically that you had specific advice for parents of 11th graders with learning disabilities. And I was wondering if you could like share more about that. I think this is really relevant both for like the test prep process and for just like school and everything else.
Yeah, for sure. And so my wife and I have twins, and our daughter has a variety of learning differences, and she does have an IEP. She does get test accommodation. She's gotten test accommodations her whole life. She gets, time and a half. And like, many people, I almost want to joke like 50% of humans, 50% of humans are going to be a little better in math, and 50% are going to be a little better in English. And I say little better. She's much, much stronger in English than she is in math. She always has been. She's always been a passionate reader. So her strength in school is the humanities, right? So obviously for a student like her, and again, this is true of maybe some kids with learning differences, but also true of some typically developing kids. Any student who has a passion for English and reading, they are going to feel more comfortable on the ACT. The current ACT, it's essentially 75% verbal. You have the ACT English section, the ACT reading, and the ACT science reasoning, which is a lot of reading comprehension. So it's just a large group of students who need to understand that they may just feel more comfortable. So, of course, historically, the ACT was the test taken more in the Midwest. The SAT was the test taken more on the two coasts.
Hmm.
Um, and now, of course, the ACT is the exit exam, and I think it's somewhere around 18 states. But the point is, it doesn't really matter what state you're in. If you are stronger in English than you are in math, then you really need to consider. So, and then also the fact that she does get testing accommodations, having extra time probably makes more of a difference on the ACT than it does on the SAT, or I should say it does for many students. So I think that the point, right, is it's not just my daughter, it's not just students with learning disabilities, it's just being thoughtful about the type of student they are, and then there's going to be maybe there's going to be a format, the SAT format or the ACT format that suits them a little bit better. For students who are naturally fast workers, and who don't don't get extra time, yeah, they may be okay with the ACT because they can they can be comfortable with having to move very quickly through the questions. And then, of course, on the opposite side, right, students who need to take their time, they may feel more comfortable on the current SAT. Now, the ACT is changing to give kids more time per question, but
Mhm.
um, I think, I guess the takeaway I want people to have is when we're talking about students with learning differences, um, just being intentional and thoughtful, and certainly consulting with people who spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff. You know, whether it's my colleagues and I at Method, or your colleagues and yourself at Achievable. Of course, reaching out to the high school counselor, who often will have thoughts and may say, "Listen, I'm not really an expert on the tests," which I appreciate because high school counselors have so much on their plate. So then, if the person says that, then going and seeking some outside advice. So yeah, I hope that's helpful
Yeah,
for listeners.
no, that is helpful. I guess one of the things that I've been curious about also, so I don't think I've told you this. When I was growing up, my brother, was autistic. And so that actually ended up being like something I talked about in one of my essays, I believe, and just kind of dealing with that. And I would imagine that if you have learning differences of your own, it has a much more profound impact on you than even, your brother. So I'm curious, do you have any thoughts for, how, if to approach this topic in your essays, or how you would like basically kind of, for lack of a better word, like weave this into the application, or whether that's even a good idea?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, I'm going to keep my answer short, Tyler, because
Yeah,
I hate to be cliched about it, but I just think it's so case by case, and I think
sure.
that you know, I like what you said earlier, that admissions officers, um, it's pretty easy for them to see when somebody's trying to essentially game the system,
Mhm.
right? And so you know you just you want to be authentic, and every human wants to be authentic. So there are so many ways to authentically weave any type of disability right into the narrative, and just trying to explain who you are as a person, and what you would bring to a college university. And then
Right,
of course there are many ways to do it in maybe an inappropriate way,
right,
right? Where you're just trying to. So I think that I think every single person who has a disability or a learning difference, I think every single person um could for lack of a better word, weave that in. But I think I would start with what's the primary story you want to tell,
mhm,
and then if your disability you know, is impactful to that, then weave it in more. And if it's maybe not, then don't talk about it as much.
right. Yeah, and I think also at the end of the day, you know, a lot of college essay material, regardless of who you are, is about overcoming challenges, right? And that is one of the greatest challenges you can have in your life. So, I mean, I think it makes natural sense. But I like what you said, right? Where it's like, don't, as long as it's coming from a genuine place, that's going to be the best approach.
And one last quick thing I just want to say is it was very comforting to my wife when she started doing research, and she saw just how many colleges and universities have programs for students with learning differences, right? That doesn't surprise me. It didn't surprise me. Um, and as a society, we've become, I think, more accepting of differences, but also just generally genuinely trying to give somebody an appropriate environment in which to learn. And so I guess my point is that, like any student with learning differences, they're bringing they're bringing something to a college. Colleges, um, you know, of course, they, like you said earlier, They want to have people who are going to achieve. They want to have people who have grit and resilience.
Hmm.
So I think for a lot of students with learning differences and disabilities, they're going to find many places that would be a good fit, that would be very happy to have them. And that's going to happen for my daughter. I'm very confident. I'm confident it's going to happen, for many kids, with learning differences.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And then as we kind of wrap up here, do you have any like anything we haven't covered yet that you wanted me to ask you about, or any kind of concluding thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, I just want to say that there's just an interesting, I don't know if the dichotomy is the right word, but people say to me every single day, like, oh my gosh, Tom, things have changed so much about this whole SAT, ACT, college admissions process. You've been doing this a long time. You've seen so many changes. Yeah, I have seen so many changes, but in so many ways, things haven't changed at all. I mean,
Right.
people reach out to us at Method. They say, listen, our son or daughter is not performing as well as they could on the SAT or ACT, you know, and we want them to have as many choices as possible after high school, and we want to save money. We know that if they score higher, they're going to be awarded a more generous package, right? So in so many respects, like I tell people, this is not like this whole process is not rocket science. It's not the easiest process in the world. I wish it was a simpler process, but on some level, it's also not overly complicated. And so we can reduce it down to, like most things in life, work really hard, put in the practice and repetition in 11th grade. You'll make a huge difference on your scores. And, and then, you're going to get into a bunch of great schools. So again, I don't think people should try to like make too much out of how much things have changed and just kind of boil it down to the essentials.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. Well, thank you so much. This has been Shift, a college admissions podcast for a changing world, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Tom Ehlers from Method Learning. And you can get a free trial of Achievable's ACT and CLT courses by going to achievable.me.